Good morning. Shalom Aleichem. So, we all study Torah in the hope that we can find ourselves in some way and kindle a fire. I think it's especially appropriate when we're talking about a portion that is framed predominantly around the challenge historically, and we're talking about the Jews in the desert, to kindle the fire, to feel fire. And in our context, it would be the continuity of a fire that was kindled and at least experientially extinguished. Which fire was that? It was the fire of Sinai. Sinai was the first step towards transferring and making available the experience of a fiery truth. And it was presented as a opportunity to take the torch and run with it, like those Olympic races based on the ancient races. You pass the baton without necessarily providing any background framework in which one could safely or in a healthy way be warmed by this fire. And it, no pun intended, it backfired. Because the notion of spontaneity on one hand and regulation on the other creates a problem when there's still some kind of a format that you want to stick to. And the Jewish people, turns out, were still very much in need of a more tactile connection to God, especially since they had the blessing of strong and very proactive leadership. Moses was very hands-on. It was a leader who was very much present, very visually available. You could go to Moses and have a yechidus with him, an audience with him. And he was the spiritual mentor and guide to the Jewish people to a fault, to the point where his father-in-law said, you're heading for a serious burnout, and you have to delegate. And so this came to ahead when Moses showed up late. The first day, Moses showed up late to the office. And the Jewish people panicked. And everything unraveled. And they had to very quickly satisfy their need for that tactile, that personal, that visual connection to God or to themselves, to a higher power or to their own power that was facilitated by Moses. And the revelation at Sinai was, notwithstanding its power, simply wasn't what suited. It was too big, in a sense. And so they fashioned a replacement, a surrogate Moses, a surrogate medium that was a way to project their need for closeness, their need for shelter, for safety. Let's not forget where they're coming from. They were just born. To imagine this people that was living an existence of imprisonment, of torture, of poverty, of total deprivation. They had no rights, no autonomy, no freedom. They didn't know how to be outside of being imprisoned, outside of... And so it was a new world for them. To a large degree, they were like a child who's just born into the world that still needs, for obvious reasons, to be held. And to a large degree, in their new experience, they were very much still in the womb. And the umbilical cord is extremely vital, that connection. So they had been deposited safely in the Garden of Eden, and then unceremoniously, they felt like they were thrust out of it. And they didn't even eat any apples. There was no snakes, no apples. And so they immediately reproduced, they approximated what it would take to feel that, and that's what the golden calf was. And so in the experiment of handing the fire, they went back, so to speak, to the drawing board. And the tabernacle.
They had idols in Egypt.
Yes.
They were used to this.
They were that
This
was
is a big transition.
yes, and that's why they in many ways needed that kind of visual reassurance. And so the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was in many ways designed as a backup generator, a womb, a mobile structure-like stand-in for Moses, a mobile structure like sanctuary that was also a format with which God's presence could be experienced and felt and summoned in the prescribed way. And when it wasn't in the prescribed way, what happens is what happened to the sons of Aaron. So there was a need for protocol so that the structure would differentiate itself from the golden calf. It had to be a godly fire. And it was a process making this transition from just going out there and handling God's words without the backup of a Mishkan, and then with the support. It was an adjustment for, it seems, for God himself, who wanted just to have the human being be that Mishkan, be that sanctuary. And God says, okay, there are some, let's step back and do this in a way that has a more supportive format and framework. And it involved God buying into this, and the building of the Mishkan, in many ways, according to God's design, was in many ways an indication of his willingness to move in this direction, although it was not yet fully activated. It wasn't fully, but it was a good sign. And when God told Moses to inaugurate the priests, the Kohanim, for 7 days as a way of a Chanukat Bayit, of a dedication of this, it was encouraging. It meant that on a very basic level, God had forgiven the Jewish people for their betrayal, which was a sharp and deep betrayal to God. You know, it's like a bride running off with someone in the wedding hall, or vice versa. It's like the most painful, imagine the most painful, profound betrayal, and then transferred into this arena. And so it was a big reestablishment of trust, and so it's understandable that there was a lot of anxiety. Are we gonna be back together? Are you coming home? Are we married? Are we gonna do this? And so the first 7 days, there was offerings, there was protocol, there was ritual, but there was no fire. And then this week's portion is the breakthrough. It's where the Battleship Galactica is deployed. It becomes activated. It's like plugged in. It's like sometimes you design something, and all the elements, all the components are there. It just doesn't work. It's like, what did I do wrong? I followed all the instructions. B'tzalel, I did this exactly the way it says on those. Yeah. But it doesn't work. And so on the 8th day, that was the breakthrough. Aaron and Moses assemble all the Jewish people, and they bless them. It's a very powerful moment. And the fire descends from heaven. And so a new era has begun where there is a mishkan, a sanctuary, put in place that is plays a supporting role and satisfies the need for direct encounter to the extent that it was direct. And it was not what God wanted originally. Obviously, we can argue that God, in his infinite knowledge, anticipated this as well.
It was plan B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so suddenly we go from ritual with no fire, and we can all identify with that. That would be the equivalent of today, just like davening, going to shul and praying, or praying at home. Let's say we put on tefillin, or we open up a siddur and daven. We build the Mishkan, we create this beautiful sanctuary, but we don't feel anything. There's no fire. We're not feeling it. And then there's the aha moments when, we do it all right, and we line everything up, and it all clicks in for a moment even. We get a momentary, like the hologram, right? We see the whole picture. And it might be brief, momentary glimpse of what it would feel like to be just fully authentic and aligned and honest, where the insides and the outsides kind of match up, and we feel whole in the way in what we want and what we do and the outcome. And then we see a third paradigm immediately with the sons of Aaron. And there's so many different angles that we can approach that with, but I think the angle here in our context today is like a shortcut. It's like, let me bypass the ritual. Let me bypass the protocol. Let me just feel the fire. In many ways, they were rejecting the backup plan. They were saying, no, let's go back to the direct encounter at Sinai the way it was originally. So it's understandable what they were reaching for. They were like, I don't need this Mishkan. I don't need this format. I don't need guidelines. I don't need framework. I just need to lock in on my terms, when I'm ready, when I want. And the response is that you can't have both. If this is the direction we're heading in, if this is the way that the encounter is being restructured, then this is the plan. We gotta follow the plan. And otherwise it lacks the necessary integrity. It can't just be relative integrity. It has to be consistent in order for it to work. And I know it sounds basic and elementary, but it is basic. And in Judaism, the way it's structured today, and especially in post-Talmudic times, we have a Talmudic Judaism, and so we wrestle with just wanting to feel and just leapfrog over 2,000 years of a format of how to be Jewish, and not with ill intentions. We all do it sometimes, and it's a shortcut, and we have our Nadav and Avihu moments where we just want instant gratification. We want the fire. We want to feel held. We want to be back at Sinai. We want to be back in the womb. And then we recalibrate and we go back to the drawing board and remind ourselves that there's a process and there's a format, and it's within this format that we are able to create a healthy balance to strike the right balances between the process and the outcome of the process, and to fill in where we need to fill in, as opposed to just pulling down what we want. So there's a lot to talk about on this, but I think there's a lot of food for thought here in terms of asking ourselves where our fire comes from. What is the process, and what is our relationship to that process, and how do we interact with it, and what are the places where that works for us, and where are the places that we struggle with it, and in our need to see Moses, to be at the foot of Sinai, what are our strange fires, and how does that work out for us or not? And these are important and good and healthy conversations, which, as they say, to be continued. But I wish all of you a great day, and
Thank you so much.
I hope we can all continue this conversation. But right now, we've got to get out there, right? And pound the pavement and make it real. All right. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.